Thank you all so much for joining us. We are here live at the Ghetto Radio headquarters just outside the library with a beautiful, beautiful view of the gardens. It really does a lot to reinforce the importance of nature in our daily lives, just having Gaia displaying herself with such sweet prominence. Welcome back to Meditations. I'm your host, Miguel Angel Medina, and today I've got a question for you that I hope that we can answer together. The question is simple. How do we distinguish between a reasonable thought and an unreasonable thought? A thought that is good for us and a thought that is bad for us. I know in colloquial society, contemporary terms, we tend to refer to things that affect us in a negative fashion as traumas, but oftentimes, when you look into the history of the word trauma, it's such a loaded term. So what you want to do when you're navigating those placid shores of your mind is to remember that there really is no trauma in this plane that is equal to the trauma of childbirth, of being born. And you got through that. So you're going to get through everything else the universe has to throw at you. That helped me a lot when I was in Transylvania, unfolding my greater psychic abilities. The realization that life will never be as good as it was in the womb, you know? Is this a reasonable thought or an unreasonable thought to have nostalgic feelings as if I could go back home to that place that we all long to go back to? I think that's the original feeling of belonging that a child first has, is belonging to the parent, because from day one, post-conception, it's like as soon as that life form starts to incubate, it's already in a state of dependence. A bit of a tangent from my question on what distinguishes a reasonable thought from an unreasonable thought, but the reason I followed that tangent is because it felt like there was some good information waiting at the end of that tunnel. Sometimes I screen my tangents as they're coming in by prognosing the probable outcome of multiple tangents of thought, selecting the one that seems closest aligned for what I need, and then navigating down that trajectory. It's conversation, right? We tend to overlook the complexity of it. So how do we know what is a valid thought and what is an invalid thought, or hearsay, or your traumas speaking? How do we distinguish thoughts? Well, I kind of already have the answer, but let's not spoil the surprise. Thoughts, reasonable, unreasonable, where do they come from? And we are back. So, separating reasonable thoughts from unreasonable thoughts. How do we know when something is good for us, or when it only appears to be good for us? Generally, that which we crave, that's where your dark roots within the realm of desire generally take place. So if you have a mind that heeds cravings, you basically have a brain that listens to a stomach, and that's just not a good way to run your body. So if you want an easy way to heal from any dark desires, just ask yourself, what am I craving? And the word raving is raving mad. It's in the word craving. So raving is also a lot of fun if you're into EDM. All that good stuff, as I am, of course. Fun times. So, I've got some reinforcements. Once again, David Hume coming in with Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. It's a study topic that I'm assigned to for the semester, so I'll be referencing it pretty heavily in our dialogues. Let's see what he has to say on thoughts and reason. First, it seems evident that animals, as well as men, learn many things from experience and infer that the same events will always follow from the same causes. So, if I hit a baseball with a baseball bat 5 times, and 5 times it goes flying, I can assume that the 6th time I hit it, it will again go flying, right? Ball plus bat plus impact equals ball go flying. So this trend of being able to identify something repeatable in your environment and applying that as functional knowledge, that's what David Hume calls experience. The ignorance and experience of the old are plainly distinguishable from the cunning and sagacity of the old, who have learned by long observation to avoid what hurt them and to pursue what gave ease or pleasure. So this cunning and sagacity generally is held by the sages, by the elders of our tribes, but it's very much accessible to the common man as well. One need only tend their thoughts as they would a garden. What does that experience entail? Tending your thoughts like you would tend a garden. Well, that's what meditation is all about. Let's go ahead and run a quick little 2-minute breathing exercise together. I'll get you all familiarized with how I tune into truth space, essentially. Getting into your higher vibrations and removing any trace of that which society has left scorched within you. There's so many borderline arbitrary traumas and so many devious traumas that society hit me with here in the American school system, and just realizing the severity with which I was impacted makes my heart burn with fury for the people that still haven't made it through that rat's maze. But it's not necessarily the American educational system that was bad, because all educational systems were struggling to figure out how to put us into increasingly smaller boxes. We now know that our thoughts were always bigger than us. There's leading metaphysical research on the bioluminescent properties of humans that I invite you to look up if you want to understand exactly what kind of functions our bodies entail. Our eyes, our visible eyes, our physical eyes are backlit. They generate light from inside the skull. You are a lighthouse. This experience is more evident from the effects of discipline and education on animals, who, by the proper application of reward and punishment, may be taught any course of action, and most contrary to their natural instincts and propensities. Yeah, for sure. So you can train a dolphin to do some pretty crazy things, right? You can train a dog to do some pretty crazy things. All you have to do is manage their expectations. The last 20 times he rang the bell, he gave me food afterwards, so guess what that bell ring means? And the dog gets it. Intelligence here would be, how quickly do you get the message? This is how the universe speaks to us, by the way. Generally speaking, it gives you a message that gets increasingly louder and more prevalent in your life until finally you heed it. And once you heed that message, you'll start to notice these pile-ups in your life will just start to fall apart, and you'll start advancing to your highest timeline. As long as you keep your perspective fixed on the highest timeline that God has created for you, you'll always make it cleanly through. It's just a matter of doing your shadow work. And a lot of that is culture, but a lot of it is also the culture of the household, what mama and papa were like. So if we're looking for irresponsible thoughts that can lead to bad action, we must start with the family, because that's the first unit that you inherit. That's your first gift. You come out of your mom, generally the first person you see is your dad, if not the doctor. Unless you turn to look at your mama, But those are the first people you see when you're born. So they're the ones that stick with you for the first 5 years of your life. They represent your foundational processor. If you pay attention to how your mother processes information and how your father processes information, you'll start to notice that the way they process information is the way that you process information, because you inherited that pattern before you ever inherited a societal pattern. I think we can finally put the nature versus nurture debate to rest, because it is first nature, as you are first a biologic entity. Second is nurture, and the nurture is by degrees. First you get your familial nurturing, then you get your educational nurturing, then you get your laborial nurturing, and if you're lucky, you get your post-laborial nurturing, which is your retirement. So, if we want to separate good thoughts from bad thoughts, we have to start by looking at our parents and recognize that when they took bad actions, we saw that as pure. And that's not always the case. And when our culture told us that some things were normal, and we believed it, maybe we don't need 3 square meals a day. Maybe there is more than meets the eye, floating all around us in the cosmos. Maybe we are more than just bodies walking the earth. Start with the mother and the father, and follow your thoughts to their logical conclusions. You'll make it through the darkness, and never have a negative thought again. Speaking from experience on that one. Let's take a quick commercial break. But first, I leave you with a passage from David Hume on reason. It is possible that this inference of the animal can be founded on any process of argument or reasoning. So, when we're looking at animals, and I personally recognize humans to be animals, we're also animated, we're filled with anima, the life force that animates things. So it's kind of reckless and impudent to say that humans aren't animals. So when we're talking about inferences that animals make that are based on processes of argument or reasoning, we know that we argue and we reason. We know that animals argue and reason to various degrees. You've heard like birds arguing or cats meowing at each other. Like, argument is part of resolution. Its conflict is part of chaos, which is part of the order of nature. So, meditate on the chaos of order and nature, and we'll link that to the realm of thought when I return. For now, think about the beautiful fractals on the surface of a crystal clear snowflake, barely visible, yet they're all the same. You are listening to Vaquero Radio. This is Miguel Angel with Meditations. Today's topic: chaos, order, reasonable and unreasonable thoughts. How does it all come together in the end? Stay tuned and find out together. Alright, you asked for it. You wanted a challenge. You said, I want to feel like a real philosopher. Well, you really stepped in it now. Because you see, according to David Hume, from the observation of several parallel instances, philosophers form a maxim that the connection between all causes and effects is equally necessary, and that its seeming uncertainty in some instances proceeds from the secret opposition of contrary causes. So, those people who seek to understand cause and effect are the same people that seek to understand chaos and order. And if we know that there is a hidden connection between chaos, order, and the mind, then we now understand that to be a philosopher, to hold the proverbial philosopher's stone, is simply to hold that kind of mental space for these broad topics. Oftentimes we get distracted with the beauty of choosing between vanilla raspberry or Mexican hot chocolate ice cream, right? Like, we get lost in these sensory pleasures that are like so many layers deep, and we don't even realize how they obscure the actual beauty of reality, which is all growth and decay, chaos and order, cause and effect. So, philosophers, we are here to join all causes to all effects. And that means understanding the golden rule. No, it's not Hammurabi's law, although we may very well have been taught that. The golden rule is to emanate as one is, which essentially translates to know thyself. But to emanate as one is, let me go ahead and put that down in my notes. That means being genuine. And today, what are we talking about? We're talking about how to discern negative thoughts from positive thoughts. How do we separate negative thoughts from positive thoughts? We start by being genuine. A rational body is never going to intentionally harm itself. So if you know that you are being genuine, you know that you're acting in your own best interests. It's part of your built-in survival programming to think within your best interests. So that's a very easy way to separate good thoughts from bad thoughts, is to simply say, hey, am I being genuine right now, or am I being affected by negative thoughts? We philosophers know that a human body is a mighty complicated machine, that many secret powers lurk in it which are altogether beyond our comprehension. So when we talk about a mighty complicated machine, I invite you to research once more what parallels can be drawn between the human body and an electrolysis machine. Once you start to see the human as a walking electrolyzer, you start to see that our secret powers stem from our ability to catalyze water using electric memories that run up and down our spinal column like this beautiful ivory elevator that takes information from the brain down to the body. It is a mighty complicated machine. When David Hume speaks of secret powers, we think oftentimes in colloquial pop culture terms, fractal visualizations, ESP, and astral travel. But secret powers can be as simple as guessing your lover's favorite color or knowing when someone's calling you right before they call you. That's the kind of secret power we're talking about in the metaphysical realm when we talk about energies that connect us to each other, that we can't see, but that connect us all the same. That's the mighty complicated machine that God built, the body of bodies. The philosopher, if he be consistent, must apply the same reasoning to the actions and volitions of intelligent agents. So, once you know yourself to be a philosopher, a distinguisher of thoughts, then you must recognize that all other intelligent agents are in that same process of distinguishing thoughts. So it's not enough to learn, oh, I know what a good thought is because it's constructive, and I know what a bad thought is because it's destructive. It's not enough to just know that. That's how you get yourself to where you need to be. Now your job is to share that knowledge with people that you come across and to build lasting patterns of order, even though our day-to-day lives can feel chaotic. As long as the chaos doesn't make it into your thoughts, there's no intrusive thought that can stop a positive mind. So chaos and order meet in the mind as constructive and destructive thoughts. How can you tell when you're having a constructive thought versus a destructive thought? All too often, destructive thoughts can feel constructive, like, hey, serve yourself some more chips, I'm sure it's not a problem. But how many times can you serve yourself chips before it's a problem? So even innocent, non-destructive actions can have lasting consequences. This is why it's important to tend the garden of the mind, so that only beautiful thoughts bloom. And welcome back. Let's do a little recap of what we learned today. First of all, evidence as experience, experience as evidence. There's a term that I invite you all to research. It's phenomenology, or the study of phenomena. What it does is it validates a lot of the experiences that people historically have been ostracized for. I won't say much more on the matter, I just invite you to experience the phenomenology of your life and how these events that swirl all around you create the beautiful reality that you get to live in. We get to experience this reality for no reason other than that we are here. Consciousness is its own reward. So there's David Hume said earlier, we may observe that the animal infers some fact beyond what immediately strikes his senses. So there's a consideration that happens. When an animal, such as a human or a llama, is struck by a sensory impression, that sensory impression is followed by cogitation, by some kind of thinking. So we know that to experience is to be, and to think is to sort of go over that experience a second time, to review. So, how do we know when our thoughts are leading us astray and when they're leading us down the right path? Oftentimes we get stuck reviewing way longer than we need to. Or not reviewing at all, as has been the troubling case with the mental health concerns that I have for our country. So, we came to recognize that philosophers have to form a maxim, as David Hume puts it, that links all causes to all effects. We are trying to connect all causes to all effects here, but how can we do that when some of our thoughts don't even connect us to the right reality that we are supposed to be inhabiting? That's where we touched on the importance of healing your nurture and your nature. So, you have to heal the parts of yourself that were born imperfect, as much as you have to heal the parts of yourself that were raised imperfect. You're basically raising yourself twice. You raise yourself 3 times. The first time is your natural timeline, which brings you to consciousness. The second time is you re-raising yourself from your parental perspective, your mother or your father. And the third time you raise yourself is with the opposite parental figure in your life. Or in the absence of an opposite parental figure, usually, psychologically, it's been shown that children find some paternal or maternal figure to dote on depending on what that child is looking for. Hope you didn't catch too much of that cough. I was betrayed by a ducky. So the universal maxim is to emanate as one is, to radiate with, what was the word we used earlier? Genuine? To radiate as a genuine being is to embody your highest state. In that state of consciousness, you won't even have the vibrational space to share it with a negative thought. So as long as you walk in sacred gratitude, you'll always have positive thoughts. And that can sound hard to believe. I myself am kind of in shock that it's working so well. But to be honest, I just don't have negative thoughts anymore. What's the worst thought that I can think of? Probably just like the miserable state of the journalistic cycles in our country and what they are covering. I have to basically process every suffering I see twice, because like I see the suffering in Gaza, but then I also have to see the journalistic suffering of like what they're not telling us and like how much worse the situation actually is. Our media is still very much controlled by the government, but it was a necessity for a certain period of our government's timeline, and we pray that our government heals even as we are healing. So, this consistency in the character of a philosopher to apply reasoning to the action and volition of intelligent agents. In other words, to recognize other intelligent agents around you and to not treat each other like animals or objects. That's the power of the philosopher, according to David Hume. Though he does agree that the characters of men are, to a certain degree, inconstant and irregular, we now know what causes inconstant and irregular behavior, of course. It's patterns of thought. That's where it all starts. If you have any negative thoughts, you have to expel them one at a time until they're all out of your system. Usually those thoughts are trying to show you something anyway. This is, in a manner, the constant character of human nature. Oh, right. And finally, on the recap, we discussed chaos as destructive thoughts, thoughts that keep you stuck in patterns of habit, addiction, or trauma, as opposed to order, which creates productive thoughts. It takes you places, it enriches your work, your family, and your social life. So, underlying the internal mental struggles of humanity has been the underlying contextual struggle of chaos and order. And until you recognize yourself as a being of order that organizes chaos, there will be no prime emanation. You have to recognize yourself as a being of order that organizes chaos. All other thoughts should flow purely, justly, and truly from this recognition. But I'm just repeating messages woven across millennia by many philosophers who have deigned me worthy to stand upon their shoulders. And now I deign you worthy the same. For if you are listening, truly a philosopher you are. Thank you all for joining us. This has been Miguel Angel with Meditations, live on Vaquero Radio.